Is Uber about to give you drivers an extra 120% in earnings based off of a new initiative to combat AB5 called the Protect Rideshare Services and Protections Act? I think I butchered that, Brandon.
You absolutely butchered it. And a lot of like the high level things sound awesome, don't they? Like
They sure do. And the one that hit me the most was the guaranteed 120% of minimum wage while you're engaged with a passenger. Now, can we dive into more detail about what that means?
Okay. So that's where things kind of get a little bit interesting because there are a couple caveats, right? What they say is they're basing that off of engaged time. And they also have like a really interesting thing where they're going to give drivers expenses for or they're going to pay drivers for their expenses 30 cents a mile, but that's for engaged miles, right? So you have to kind of look into the fine details about what is engaged time and engaged miles, and that basically means where a passenger is in the car. It does not mean when you are driving to get to a hot area. It does not mean when you're driving to a passenger. It means when you are driving with a passenger in your car. That's only the time you're going to get that 120%. 30 cents a mile, right? Which is nice, but it's only during those engaged time. Not quite
a little deceiving.
Accurate.
A little bit of now again, this proposed bill, it's sponsored by Uber, right?
Right. So it is. I guess we should make that very clear. So this is an act that Uber and Lyft are presenting. That's basically, like you were saying, combating AB5 a little bit, which is already a passed law. So they're trying to basically pass another law, kind of like on top of that, in order to just kind of force this into practice, right? Mm-hmm. So Uber and Lyft are working together, along with, is it DoorDash?
I think it's DoorDash.
In this as well, mm-hmm. they all put a ton of money in there. I think like $30 million or something like that, in order to combat this AB5 that's already passed. And I think it's like really interesting that Uber and Lyft are so worried about this right now that they are literally working together.
No, really,
they are working together in order to combat that.
Imagine that, two competitors working together. Right.
Along
ding,
with
ding,
DoorDash.
Ding, alarm bells, ding, ding, ding. As a driver, you should be really worried about this.
Right.
Not worried, but
and yeah. And what I think is interesting about this is that it's pretty clear that like Uber and Lyft and like these rideshare companies understand that they need to do something, and these measures are going to keep coming up that are AB5, similar to AB5, right? And then so even if you don't get AB5, which actually a lot of drivers don't love because it does make you an employee, the threat of having that is pushing them to do things that are like this Protect App-Based Drivers and Services Act, which are a step in the right direction. What I think you need to add is change that engaged time and engaged miles. That needs to be pretty much whenever you're
online,
have the app on and are actively trying to.
I agree.
Trying to find a ride, right? So if you're just sitting there and you are at least trying, but you're just sometimes shit's just dead. Yeah. Then like you should be paid for that time as well if they're gonna have this measure.
I'll tell you what. What other provisions were we have the 120% above minimum wage guarantee while you're engaged with a passenger. We have the 30 cents per mile expense reimbursements while you're engaged with a passenger. What other provisions were in that factoid sheet rundown?
So there's a healthcare stipend, which is nice. That's cool. If you work more than 25 hours a week, which I'm assuming it's that engaged time, you get 82% of a covered California bronze healthcare insurance plan.
So basically, that's pretty average, pretty actually above average healthcare.
I have no fucking idea. I am not a healthcare.
I think it is, and I think it's but the 25 hours per week is the kicker, because I mean if you're part time, you're not going to qualify for that unless you're a fiend and you just drive.
Right. I wonder how does that work? Like, do they just take it away like very quickly? Like, how does that?
Like,
what if I drop for like a week? Am I just off my fucking healthcare plan?
Dude, that's a good question. How can you guarantee healthcare but then also have like an hourly limit or hourly threshold. That doesn't make that good point, Brandon.
I don't know.
You're just,
I don't know what that.
Healthcare
Well, I mean,
carte?
Go ahead.
Also, there's some other provisions down below, right? Something about capped driving hours. Now, my concern as a driver is what is the definition of capped hours? Is this the 12 hours that Uber and Lyft had already have in their policies, or is this like much, much less? Is this capped hours while online total, or is this capped hours with a passenger engaged in my car? Because let me tell you, if it's capped at less than 12 hours and for total online time, that means I'm driving less and have less money to make.
Yeah. So we're definitely going to put the link to this, this is the website for this initiative, but there's also like some very detailed text about the whole act that kind of goes into like deep detail about what are all these kind of small things. And then so in this you can see that a cap is based on when a driver is logged in and driving on the platform. So that's a little bit vague there because it says logged on and driving. So does that mean logged on and driving with passengers in the car, or does that mean logged on and just driving trying to find a passenger?
This is something
unclear.
Yeah. Again, guys, link to everything that we talk about in this podcast in the description of this video below. And also, while we're talking about the video below, please look to the bottom right, tap that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and leave a like or a comment. For Brandon.
Right.
Yeah. You know what? This whole thing has got me thinking. When two competitors band together to basically say, hey, rideshare drivers, we're willing to reimburse you 30 cents a mile for expenses, in addition to guarantee you 120% over minimum wage, you know what this tells me? They know they're like doing wrong. These companies know that they're like gouging and taking so much from us drivers. Because why else would they like want to give us these back? Think about it for a second. If you're a driver, why would Uber, why would Lyft want to give you 30 cents a mile? Why would Uber and Lyft want to give you 120% over minimum wage? It means they know they're doing something fishy here.
Yeah.
Already.
It definitely shows like how much drivers are at a point where they have leverage, right? So if you're a rideshare driver, you are starting to press these companies because they know that if they need to according to AB5, if they have to classify drivers as employees, that is not going to be financially viable. So they understand that is risking a significant amount of their business. Now, they say that it's California in general is only a small percentage of their overall profit and overall revenue. But when you start to look at the broader ecosystem of drivers understanding that they can put forth like AB5 style regulation across the country, then you start to see how, you're really starting to threaten their whole business model. So you can get things like this bill that they're trying to push through that isn't enough yet.
Yeah.
You got to get that. You could even just say, just bump that up to 200% or 140%. That might be good enough to cover. That might be good enough to cover like the miles that your dead miles and stuff like that. But that's where you have to start to push to improve that, and there's leverage there to do that.
You're right. This isn't the fairy godmother that's giving us this. This is Uber and this is Lyft and DoorDash. So if we should probably be pushing more because they're not going to give us like what they think is fair. They're going to give us what they can get away with.
Right.
And right now they're thinking they could get away with 30 cents a mile reimbursement and 120% over minimum wage. So I completely agree with what Brandon said. We need to unite as drivers and push for more.
Right.
Because they're not giving us
this is just the beginning of like this is the beginning of the negotiation, right? So there was AB5, which are like, holy shit, we can't do that. Yeah, and then that was the driver's starting point, really. AB5. And then there is the Uber's starting point now of, we'll give you this like bill with 120% of minimum wage, 30 cents per mile expense reimbursement. Okay, you got now it's up to negotiations to meet somewhere in the middle, because UC Berkeley did a study about this Protections Act, and they said that only drivers would actually only be making about $5.64 per hour. I haven't reviewed that super in depth, so I'm not necessarily co-signing, what UC Berkeley has put out there, but what they're speaking of, it definitely makes sense given the unpaid waiting time, unreimbursed waiting time, miles, etc.
Now that's what we call. It all circles back to what the hell are engaged miles?
Right.
Needs to be defined. Very important, because if you're going to offer and give drivers reimbursements for miles and extra guaranteed minimum wage per mile, you got to define what the hell exactly is a qualified mile. So the UC Berkeley study, again, all of these documents, please click the link below. We're going to link them. Say out of the $15 that they claim, $15.24 or something that they claim is the guaranteed minimum wage, after all the hidden costs, after all the engaged miles have been calculated, it only brings it down to $5.64 guaranteed per hour, which is way below minimum wage for California, which I think is what, 13 or 15?
Yeah, I think minimum wage is $13. It's supposed to be 120% of that, so it should be $15.60.
Mm-hmm.
What they're calculating is $5.64, which obviously
a third of that.
Yeah, it's a third of that. Mm-hmm. So that's obviously not quite there. So if I'm a driver in negotiations, I'm looking at this data saying, okay, yeah, we're not getting paid for waiting time. We're not getting paid for like these unreimbursed miles. Go ahead and instead of 120%, go ahead and pay us 360% of that, and then we're good. We're good. Yeah, for sure. Right,
or just put rates back to where they belong. Uber only takes 20 to 25% max, instead of this 50% BS that's been going on recently.
I think that ship sailed though.
Well, anyways, what's the next topic we have for our
Let's so another thing interesting is this Uber debit card, right?
Ooh.
And so obviously Uber, they have a couple of different kind of banking options for drivers already. They have different cards and things like that. They are releasing Uber has announced Uber Money, which is kind of another division in Uber.
Is this money on demand?
I mean, that's what's really interesting. It basically is money on demand, right? Ooh. So there's a lot of other things, but the main thing is you can get paid literally right after a trip, right? So you can have cash. I can do a trip, get paid $20 for the trip, go to the gas station and spend that same $20.
So this is completely different than InstaPay, which transfers money to your personal debit card for a 50-cent transaction fee per transaction.
Right.
So this is completely free. This goes to the Uber card.
Yeah, and it goes to an Uber card, an Uber debit account.
So you don't even need to initiate. It just automatically does it.
I believe so. Yeah. I'm not a little bit. They were a little bit fuzzy on the exact details because it hasn't quite
always so fuzzy
come out yet. But yeah, it's an Uber debit card. It's
as
Uber
fuzzy as your webcam. Your webcam is fuzzy today.
My webcam.
Your webcam.
Oh, I'm not using my good webcam. That's why.
Okay. Anyways, so they're also trying to get into the fintech space. Now, what is fintech? It's a financial technology. And there's 2 points that analysts have said, experts actually have said that this might actually be a really strong power play for Uber. The first point is they already have integration with their app. Drivers are using Uber driver app. There's no way around it. So the fact that you already have an app that people frequent, now you can embed financial services into that, starting with the Uber debit card. You can also link other financial services such as loans, credit, and you have all of the driver spending behavior unlocked at your disposal, giving you even more efficiencies in figuring out what lending rates to give and offer your drivers. And the other is Uber needs revenue. Uber is bleeding cash. What was it? They lost $1.1 billion last quarter?
I should know this, but I don't know off the top of my head. They lost a shit ton of money. They've lost $8 million. They've lost $5.5 in cash.
Mm-hmm. So what do you
this
think
year
about
alone.
Brandon? What do you think about Uber, the company? Well, let's talk about demographics of Uber drivers. We're predominantly male, predominantly older millennials or Gen X. For those of you who want to know what that time age frame is, it's anywhere from 28 to like 45 males, and about half are minorities. Either 1/3 or half, I think, are minorities. So, what's the other number? I think 60-some percent, greater than 50% rely on Uber and Lyft, rely on gig economy work as a primary revenue source. So again, all of their drivers, Uber itself, not only do you work for them, well, you do gig work for Uber or Lyft, but now you're going to be relying on Uber for your financial services. You don't need a bank anymore.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, that's interesting. It's another way for Uber to like lock drivers into their platform.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about.
That's
Is
another
this like
way to
payday loans?
Yeah, that's another way to do that. If you have like all of your banking and shit, they like give you like $100 spot loan, when you need it. That ties people in pretty heavily. So that's like a play there. And obviously like Uber like needs to figure out ways of just making revenue that's very profitable. And then this is like the whole fintech business, like things along those lines. That's like where that's a big piece of what they're doing, but it also has pretty strong correlations to like building the product for drivers to be as addictive as possible, so that drivers can't necessarily be without Uber, at least not completely.
Yeah, and also generate them much needed revenue, and that revenue should be profit.
Much needed revenue that's profitable, because they have a shit ton of revenue,
just not profitable.
They don't have a shit ton of profit at all.
Yeah.
So that's like a big deal for them.
But they did have speaking of earnings, they just released their Q3. They lost 1.1 billion, but they grew their total revenues to 3.8 billion in total revenue. Now, this was also due in part to a growth in their Uber Eats segment. So Uber Eats is actually one of their fastest growing revenue sources. I mean, personally, myself, I've used Uber Eats plenty of times.
Yeah.
Have you?
Uber Eats is definitely big for them in terms of growth. It's still relatively small in terms of overall.
Their rides is 2.8 billion in revenue.
Yeah, rides is still the big. It's still the thing where they're largest, but definitely Uber Eats is growing pretty quickly. For sure,
dude. Awesome. What's next?
And just real quick, real quick on their earnings report. Something interesting. Last podcast, I kind of harped on this. Look out and understand, what's Uber's take rate. Same thing with Lyft. Understand what is Lyft's take rate, and then so you can see that across with Uber, their take rate, which is basically how much in totality they take from drivers, not necessarily from every ride. This isn't going to represent every single person, but in totality, kind of across the whole business, they averaged out a take rate of, I think, 21.5%, right? And then so that is actually increasing. I think, don't quote me, I think almost 1%, maybe 0.7.
Really? So they're making more money off of drivers.
Say that again?
They're making more money off of us.
Yes, they are making more money off of drivers, and they are doing it by decreasing what they call are these excess driver incentives, which are basically is the effect of the flat surge, and changing how they do that, right? So that's basically where a lot of that increase in take rate appears, at least to be coming from, based on my analysis of their financial statements. And we actually have data that is showing drivers are getting paid less. So I think it was, and we're gonna have a full article about this. But in 10 out of 14 markets that we analyzed for this specific study, we were in a lot of markets, but we analyzed 14 markets for this specific study. From Q1 to Q2, 10 out of 14 of markets, the average driver made less money from Q1 to Q2. And then in 11 out of 14 of those markets, from Q2 to Q3, the drivers made on average less money. So
Oh.
we are seeing drivers actually making less money as both Uber and Lyft are starting to increase their take rate. Not necessarily saying those are 1,000% causational, but there's obviously some correlation
Yeah,
there.
there's some correlation for sure. I like to reiterate to our viewers that this data is based off of the 90,000. We have 90,000 active monthly drivers on the Gridwise platform in 32 cities now. So this isn't just like 20 drivers here or there kind of deal, guys. This is across. You said 14 markets, 10 out of 14 markets.
Mm-hmm. So it's pretty big.
Oh, this is the old logo. Whoop,
Yeah.
I covered that. We did a branding change. For those of you who are still watching, we did a branding change. So this old logo is no longer the logo. Guys, make sure you like this podcast video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Also, leave a comment below asking Brandon any kind of question you want to ask Brandon.
Or ask Jenda.
Or ask me. Hashtag J or hashtag B.
How he's growing out his fabulous beard here.
Dude, I know, man. It's, by the way, you might have been like, where was Jay last week? He was on vacation, so I'm back now.
Where were you at?
I was in français. Je suis in français. Je m'appelle Jay.
Very cool. All right, last thing here. We did a survey
You sure
of
did.
1,500 riders, and we basically asked them about how they feel about Uber drivers and like what's some things that kind of annoy them. One thing that really stuck out that was super interesting to me was that 51% of passengers would pretty much always rather have a silent ride, meaning they don't want to say anything.
To me, as a driver, I always chat with people, and I never thought about like maybe they don't want to talk to me at all.
Right, and that jives because we also surveyed the drivers, and 79% of drivers said they want their passengers to speak.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think that are watching this? We get an average about 1,000 views per podcast. So I know there's 1,000 eyeballs on this. What do you 1,000 people that are watching this feel? Do you want your passengers to talk or not talk? Let us know in the comment section below. Hashtag B, hashtag J. Let's see who wins.
Let's see. And what is also really interesting about this is that 90% of passengers said they would never tell a driver to stop talking, even if they are annoyed by them talking.
Insane. 90% of 1,500 passengers said that.
Yep.
People like to avoid confrontation. People
really like to avoid confrontation, and then also there's such an imbalance between how much drivers want to talk and how much passengers want to talk.
Yeah,
if you're a driver that talks, you almost are definitely annoying some passenger, and they're just not telling you about it, which is I think it's kind of funny.
Dude, this is so crazy. We'll publish this in the link below. This is actually what famous website used our data? Mashable, is that what it is?
Mashable, yep.
Yeah.
It's up on Mashable. We will have a blog post kind of because we went into a couple of different really interesting data points. We'll have a blog post with a lot of those findings coming soon, not this week, but that'll be coming soon.
And that's it.
And I think that's all we got today.
That's all we got today. Guys, thank you for joining Brandon and Jay on another Gridwise podcast. Make sure you guys subscribe, notification bell, and also have a good day.
Have a great one, guys.
And good to see you guys all again. All right, guys. Ciao, ciao.